All right, tell me everything. Who are you? How did you deliver this? Most people don't know your name. It's not like a name that was out there all the time, like our friend Charlie Kirk or like Elon's group, but we knew was canvassing and trying to get voters out. Ashley Hayek. Who's Ashley Hayek? What is this group? How did you get pulled into this?
So we are the sister organization to the America First Policy Institute, which is run by Brooke Rollins and Linda McMahon, Larry Kudlow, and many of the other former Trump administration officials. And we were launched in November of 2021, and we really were focused on a lot of state policy. So working in target states, advancing policy at the state level, advancing Trump America First policies at the state level. And then in 2023, we had the opportunity to really look at, how do we continue to build upon the movement? And this was before I think President Trump even announced, but we started talking to different organizations. We started looking at how we can grow with, Hispanic voters and women voters and Black Americans and parents. And my background, I worked on the Trump 2020 campaign. I was the coalitions director. We had over 45 different coalitions. We had 650 advisory board members. And I knew that the inroads that President Trump and his message could make. So to be able to continue that mission was absolutely critical. Lee Zeldin is on the board of America First Works. He was really a key integral part of this, given that he ran for governor and got almost 50% of the vote in a state that had only 23% Republican registration. So how do we take that model and apply it to the battleground states, really targeting low and no propensity voters? So we had a meeting in January. We had a few other organizations
January
at the table.
Of 2024?
2024, yep.
Okay.
And it was to determine—
Is this the one down in Washington, D.C.?
This was in our office on Pennsylvania Avenue at the time. And there was only 7 groups that had met. It was a pretty small group. And from that meeting, we realized this has to be so much bigger. You look at the data, you look at the numbers, this is going to take all hands on deck. So there was about 50 organizations that met on April 3rd at the Willard Hotel. And we had a briefing from Kellyanne Conway on polling. Lee Zeldin, made some remarks about his race in New York. And then we did a data presentation where we looked at the numbers and determined where we needed to be and which audiences we needed to target. And we talked about who was going to do what where, who's going to do digital, who's doing radio, who's doing text messaging. And one of the biggest gaps that we saw at America First Works was the ground game. And that was when we realized this was our opportunity to step up and help with ground game. And that was, Megyn, right when the FEC opinion came to fruition as well. And that was a game changer, I think, for the movement.
We were all in my lane, media, speculating about how, geez, it's a risky bet because she's got, reportedly, voters like women who are high propensity voters who have a track record of getting out there, even in the midterm, even in the local elections, they vote. And Trump's relying on these lower propensity or never before voters. And so that's a risky bet. You, as far as I can tell, that's not untrue. That was true. But you guys were looking at those low propensity or never before voters saying they're gettable. We can make them get out.
100%. And I think one of the untold stories was the women who showed up for President Trump who did not show up for Kamala Harris. So at that April 3rd meeting, one of the things we talked about was that there is a massive gender gap across the country, especially in states like Georgia and North Carolina, where you have 10 to 12% more women participating in elections than men. And we even told some of the moms groups that were there, Moms for Liberty, Moms for America, in 2016, Hillary Clinton said, husbands, told their wives how to vote. Well, now we need to tell moms, you need to tell your husband to go vote. And that's exactly what happened. Leading up to the election, up to, the weekend before, the media was completely gaslighting conservatives and the public, saying that Harris had historic support for women. There was at that point in the battleground states, 112,000 more Republican women that had already voted, and 500,000 500,000 Democrat women that had not voted yet. That's a 600,000 vote swing, not in favor of Harris. She had a massive disadvantage amongst women, and we saw that play out on Election Day as well.
So when you saw the Harris campaign send out that messaging, and the New York Times reported the same messaging, that there had been this huge spike in female voter registration in Pennsylvania, and that they were they were coming, like they were showing up in droves. That was what the report was, that they were not the registration, but they were showing up in droves in the early voting. Your response was what?
That's a lie. And we put a tweet out, and I did a couple of media hits that this is not true. She doesn't have that support. But Megyn, like, you can't say, what is a woman? You can't force men into women's bathrooms. You can't make women feel unsafe and have, illegal aliens kill young girls on a jog at her university and think women are going to show up for you. So President Trump was delivering the message. You were delivering the message, and it made it very easy for us in America First Works to connect that message to the people and make sure America First voters were showing up and not the Democrat voters. And the Democrat voters, they stayed home. They stayed home because they can't buy into this craziness from the radical left.
Wow. Was there one particular message for all the groups, or did the message change depending on which voters you were targeting?
It wasn't so much that the message changed, it was who was delivering the message. So in a lot of ground games, people will hire like a firm and they'll subcontract to a bunch of different firms. We tried to choose firms, because ours was all paid canvassing, that were best for that area. So, we had part of Brian Kemp's team that ran our Georgia program. We had the Frederick Douglass Foundation that reached out to Black Americans. We had 20 Arabic door knockers in Dearborn. And those boys, there's 20 of them, young men, they knocked on tens of thousands of doors in Dearborn. And I believe they're part of the reason that Dearborn flipped, was because they were taking the Trump policies and delivering it to their actual community. So we tried to get people that, it's are you like me? Do I like you? Are you a member of the community? Are you just being imported? And we just saw that message worked. We sent text messages from Riley Gaines. We sent videos with Hunter Nation, another C4 organization, of Ted Nugent, to hunters and Second Amendment people. So you had to have the right message, but overall, the right messenger, but overall the message was the same.
So my understanding is it took an average of about 3 text messages to these low propensity voters to convert them into, I guess you got about 40% of them to actually, the ones you targeted, to the polls. And it was 2 texts on messages, and then the third text on, let's go. Like, now it's time, get up, we're going to get out, and we're going to actually vote.
So we did 3 door knocks, 3 visits, physical visits, like someone going to their house. And then in addition to that, we had a text messaging program. The cool thing about the text messaging program was we had a team of 50 volunteers who would actually reply to the text messages. So if you got a text message from Riley Gaines, for example, and you replied back, and I'll be honest, sometimes they were just like, F you, we would say, oh, I'm so sorry that we bothered you, but we just wanted to make sure you had your polling place. And they were blown away that there was someone on the other end that was actually reading the text messages. And from there, we could have a conversation. The day after the election, Megyn, we started sending text messages out again to every low and no propensity voter who's Republican, Democrat, and independent, saying, welcome to the America First movement. What do you want to see on day one of a new administration? Because now we've built these relationships, we have to expand our base. We went up with Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, women, youth. This is our opportunity to make sure that people feel heard and that we connect them with these policies and make this the most successful first 100 days of any administration.
You know what's crazy? I know this is anecdotal, but I mean, the youth vote did turn out for Trump in a way that it normally never does for a Republican. She still won it, but it was tight. It was very tight, and it's never tight. But I'm sure you've seen these videos of all these young, beautiful women, like in bikinis and the red MAGA hat, dancing. The MAGA label, the hat, the message, far from being toxic as it was considered by many 8 years ago. It's cool now. Like that didn't just happen. That was the result of, yes, President Trump, but also these door knocks and the constant messaging from people like you.
Well, and I have 4 daughters and I have 1 boy. And this election to me, I think like a lot of moms, was personal. And when you hear the stories, we did an event in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it was 2 moms that lost their sons to fentanyl poisoning. One was a senior in high school, super overachiever. The other one was in college, and the stories were devastating. I could hardly get through the conversation with them because I was so moved to tears. But that happens in every community. That's happening across the country. And I think just being able to take those stories and connect them to people is what really changed hearts and minds. And that's what this was about. It's how do you convince people? There's a cool side of it, of course, with the Swifties for Trump, and you see such a cultural shift too. Our athletes have been phenomenal in, carrying the America First banner. But I think for so long too, just a little bit of a separate point is we have been shamed to be Americans. And that's just wrong. Like, we should be proud to be Americans. We're the greatest country in the world. And we've had the elite and the woke and the leftists try and force such garbage down our throats that we should feel sorry for that, when we're the reason the world can continue in a way that doesn't have 3 wars break out like we just saw this past administration.
For those of us holding our breath for the past several months, we can finally exhale. The sky seems a little bluer, doesn't it? Work can finally be done on the major issues this country's facing, one of the most significant being our national debt. The fact is, our nation's broke, and that debt is a house of cards that cannot be quickly dismantled. So the strategy remains the same. You might want to diversify your savings. This is why I want to tell you about Birch Gold. So many things are out of our control, out of our president's control for that matter. So it can be important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group can help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is it does not cost you 1 cent out of pocket. Just text MK to 989898 to get your free info kit. Plus, right now through Black Friday, you're going to receive a free 1-ounce silver eagle coin for every $5,000 purchased. Protect your savings with Birch Gold. Text MK to 989898 and claim your eligibility for free silver today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.